So what I've got today from MSI is the MPG B850I Edge TI Wi-Fi. This is a B850 motherboard that is higher end than some of the other X870 ITX motherboards that just launched. This is brand new for 2025 basically. It's a 8-phase power design, dual M.2 connections, has a 5 gigabit LAN and Wi-Fi 7. Let's take a closer look. I also like that the box isn't absurdly huge. Your ITX Chariot for your $2,000 GPU, right? So what do you get in the box? You get the board. What I like about the board is one of your M.2 slots is on the back of the board. The other one is on the front, and it has built-in cooling, so you can get an M.2 that doesn't have extra cooling, so you spend a little bit less. It has 2 SATA ports. It has a Type-C connector and a front panel connector for 5 gigabit USB ports. It has your audio, it has a USB 2 header, and it has a front panel header. It also has 3 4-pin fan headers, 8-pin CPU power input, standard 24-pin power here. There is this temptation to move this 24-pin power connector off of the motherboard. You could totally have a little pigtail header where your motherboard mostly generates the voltages it needs. It doesn't need all the legacy ATX connections, but can still power control, like, you know, soft power on, that kind of thing. So you see these little breakout headers that go from this to a power supply connector. You see that on server motherboards and places where server is power constrained. I'm really surprised we haven't seen it on ITX boards yet, because that would free up a lot of real estate. Might be able to get a third M.2 in here. At the rear I/O, we've got 2 blue 5 gigabit ports, 4, well, there's 3 10 gigabit ports. The other one is the Type-C front panel is 10 gigabit. And then we've got a USB Type-C 20 gigabit connection. We've got our Wi-Fi 7 connectors, that's standard reverse SMA. Then we've got our SPDF line out, microphone in, and line out. We also have 2 tiny buttons here. One is BIOS flashback and the other one is clear CMOS. So you can flash the BIOS for this for new CPUs without having a CPU in it. If you get one of these and it won't post, chances are you just need to do the BIOS flashback procedure to update the BIOS to whatever chip or chip revision that you're using in the board. Also in the box, you get an RGB breakout. So there's this weird little 8-pin connector just above the USB Type-C connection, and that is for this ARGB breakout cable. We also have a really nice white Wi-Fi antenna that goes with this board. It's good to see. In the box, we've also got a front panel extension header, so you can hide your front panel connections a little easier if you want. A single SATA 6 gigabit per second SATA port, and a Corsair to 5050 header adapter. So if you're all in the Corsair game, you can use this. There's also some stickers for labeling cables, Lucky, the MSI Dragon, some European notices, the regulatory notices, and some QR codes to help you with your motherboard installation if this is your first time. Although, you probably should just use some level 1 guides for that. There's also the MSI Shoutout program where you can share your product experience and being entered to win contests and things like that. This is a word-of-mouth marketing thing. It's reasonable, in my opinion. We also have some M.2 mounting screws that are lurking in our box. Now, first boot, MSI does a kind of an interesting thing here. This is just a test bench. I just set this up for the video. You should not use, this is weak sauce cooling. You need better cooling. But when you first power it on, you'll get a prompt that says, do you want PBO auto or PBO off? And so this will let you turn on overclocking pretty much immediately with PBO. PBO is a kind of a, you know, if you're not used to AMD's platform or you haven't heard anything about it, PBO generally is auto overclocking with stability. There's variability in all silicon. And so what PBO is meant to do is to give you the performance above the minimum floor, the cutoff that AMD has. Like, all chips will perform at least this good, but it will let you have a chip that performs a little bit better, giving it a little bit more wattage, but that hopefully doesn't introduce any instability. The promise of PBO is that you don't really get instability. That's not always true, but mostly that is true in my experience. We're not gonna do that for right now though. One of the things I'm always curious about, ECC UDIMM support. Does that work on this board? Well, it booted with ECC UDIMMs installed. Let's see if Linux detects them. All right, so here we are, memory testing. It posts with the ECC memory. DMI decode sees it's at 72 bits wide, but I don't think the EDAC driver is loading. So if you're looking for error correcting DDR5 memory, not gonna do it. It does work with 120 gig DIMMs though. Memory speed. So DDR5 6000 is a pretty safe bet. DDR5 6600 I think is also a pretty safe bet. I was trying our G-Skill. This is our G-Skill Trident Z F5 8000 kit, and not at 8000. At like 6600 with pretty tight timings, it's fine. But remember, at 8000, it's like CL40, and really the sweet spot on AMD is like CL28 for 6000, so that you can run 1-to-1-to-1. That's still pretty much true. I know when Ryzen 9000 launched, it was like there was some hope of 8000 plus DIMMs, and that is possible. And that is possible when you've got a multi-layer board. But for this board, I'm still going to recommend DDR5 6000. Not that you can't build a really nice 9800X3D based system with this, but I mean, it's DDR5 6000, but you're not going to be running, at least I don't think it's going to be stable. But I was also surprised that you can run DDR5 128 gigs, 264 gig DIMMs, 5600. That's basically fine, but keep in mind that's also still going to be CL like 40, not 28. It's really tough to do the tight secondary timings when we're talking about 64 gig DIMMs, 48 gig DIMMs that are out in the market. However, 32, CL32 does work on this platform. That seems to work fine. This does not have a standard CR2032 battery for the battery backup, as most ITX boards don't, to save on space. It uses a removable battery on a special header. They're still easy to replace, they're still easy to order. It's just that, you know, every local store that carries a CR2032, it's so easy to get a replacement CMOS battery. But this, you'll probably have to order one from Amazon or somewhere online. It's probably not going to be a local source if your CMOS battery does not work. Here's a little close-up of what I'm talking about with the CMOS battery. You can kind of see it tucked away back there. Now there were Amazon listings for that kind of battery where it's like in a, you know, it's got some wires off of it, but you got to dig in there to replace. Really nice built-in 5 gigabit Realtek NIC. So that is nice to see on this platform. It has diagnostic LEDs at the top edge of the motherboard as well, which is another nice feature to have. It tells you if you're having CPU or memory or other types of issues. You've got the green LED for positive status, and so it's diagnostics and that sort of thing are a little easier to deal with. The M.2 fan was inaudible once this thing was inside a case. I know some people really, really hate having a tiny little fan. So if you are one of those people, you don't have to use this M.2 cooling solution. You can order your M.2 with a built-in cooling solution or a heatsink or whatever your M.2 solution recommends and replace this heatsink, but this is a very effective heatsink, and it is located above the graphics card. The front panel header is also located toward the rear of the board, so it's going to be pretty close to your graphics card. So when you're installing your graphics card, be sure not to snag your front panel cable. That would be bad if you jam it into your PCIe slot. I've seen it before. It's not pretty. The other thing that's weird is the M.2. So most of the time, the thing that generates heat is the controller. The controller is what gets hot. This has got a fan blowing over the controller. The thermal connection is actually to the flash chips. The flash chips tend to want to run hotter than the controller. And so the layout of the controller is not a given. Sometimes it's really close to the M.2 edge connector, which is here, which, you know, means that we don't have a thermal connection for the cooler, but we do have a fan. Sometimes it's in the middle here where we would have a connection. So if the controller's in the middle of your M.2, you're going to have a heat pad. If it's at the front of your M.2, you're just going to have the fan. It's a little odd. I'm happy to report full round testing with Windows and Linux basically came out exactly the way that I expected. Realtek ALC 897 for our audio codec. It's a Realtek 5 gigabit NIC for our LAN. So pretty good support across the board on the Linux side of things. There's no ECC support, however, and this is really interesting. Our ECC UDIMMs would actually post, but would not enable with the launch version of the BIOS for this board, which I don't recommend. The launch version of this BIOS has some performance issues and some significant bugs. As of June 8th or 9th, there's a revised BIOS for the B850I Edge TI Wi-Fi that corrects those errors, and you get full performance from both the 9800X3D and a 9950X3D. Whether you're using, you know, a 5090 or a 9070 XT or whatever GPU that you're using. But with that BIOS update, the board will no longer post with ECC UDIMMs installed. It works great even with 64 gig DIMMs. I've got some Crucial 64 gig DIMMs. Those have looser timings. I'm currently running some Crucial 48 gig DIMMs with tighter timings. I've also done gaming RAM and that sort of thing. I also tested the M.2 on the back side of the motherboard. If you can use a thick thermal pad or have something like touch the outside of your case, that'll help in terms of thermal management. I was testing the PCIe Gen 5 Phison M.2. That is a Gen 4 port back there, but that is a low power M.2, and so it doesn't get super hot, but it's still kind of worryingly hot. So if your motherboard tray has a cutout or something for the M.2, and you can put a heatsink on the M.2, that is definitely advised for the M.2 that's on the back side of the motherboard. The M.2 on the top, however, PCIe Gen 5, no problems there. It was able to get full Gen 5 speed. Nothing to complain about. All in all, it's a pretty solid ITX platform. 8 power phases is plenty to get the job done. You do have a little bit of PBO headroom, but if you're looking to do some major overclocking on the AM5 platform, I would suggest a higher end board. Other than that, that's about all you really need to know with this board. MSI is working on some new overclock features that'll work with X3D and non-X3D for auto overclocking, something that goes a little beyond PBO. That wasn't quite ready at the time that I was putting this video together, but that may be something that I revisit to take a look at that. And it's really aimed at more of a Windows feature to be able to do some overclocking and stuff directly inside of Windows with your 9000 series CPUs, but hey, not too bad. This is just a quick preview of the B850I Edge TI Wi-Fi and 5 gigabit LAN. Do you know of any other ITX solutions? Are there any ITX solutions that have a 10 gigabit built in? I was pretty excited because, you know, there's X870 that doesn't even have 5 gig built-in LAN in the ITX variety. I was very glad to see that here. I would have liked to have more USB ports at the rear, but this does have a USB 2.0 header, so if you have internal accessories that are going to use USB 2, you can just plug them directly into the header of the motherboard, and that's reasonable. Just like this motherboard is reasonable. I'm going to list level 1. That's been a quick look at the MSI B850 Edge TI Wi-Fi. It's pretty good for Windows and Linux use cases. I really like how MSI has improved their BIOS the last couple of generations of the board. That's true whether you're Team Intel or Team AMD. The BIOS is a lot more accessible. Memory triad, especially if you're going to do overclocking, that was really handy during my memory testing. But yeah, it's nice to see. It's nice to see a nice little ITX board. All right, I'm Wendell, this is level 1. I'm signing out. You can find me in the level 1 forums if you have any questions or if there's anything else you want to see in detail.